You know, after 40 years on this bench, I've learned that the worst kind of poverty isn't the lack of money, it's the lack of consequences. I've seen families with nothing teach their children about accountability, and I've seen families with everything fail because their children have never experienced a single real consequence. On a cold Friday morning in November, I witnessed something that changed how I think about parenting and wealth. This case involved a 17-year-old boy named Brandon Prescott, and before that day ended, his entire life would shift. Let me take you back to the beginning. I've been a judge since 1985. That's 40 years of watching people walk through these doors on what is often the worst day of their lives. But I've learned something important. I've seen young people who made mistakes, faced the reality of those mistakes, and grew. And I've seen young people protected from consequences their entire lives, who eventually crashed and burned because no one ever told them no. My father was also a judge. He used to tell me that every day on the bench is a test of character. He said that power reveals who you really are. When you have the ability to affect someone else's life, your true nature comes out. You can use that power to help, or you can use it to hurt. My father taught me that the best judges aren't the ones who hand out harsh sentences. They're the ones who understand that their job is to create a framework where people can learn and grow. On a Tuesday morning in August, a delivery driver named Marcus Chen was doing his job. Marcus was 23 years old, hardworking, quiet. He worked for a restaurant supply company, delivering kitchen equipment to restaurants around the city. It wasn't glamorous, but Marcus took pride in it. He was saving money because he had a dream. He wanted to open his own small café someday. He was the kind of young man that this country needs more of. On August 19th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Marcus was making a delivery to Westside Bistro in the Pearl District. He was unloading boxes from his truck when it happened. A silver Porsche 911 brand new came flying through the parking lot at an excessive speed. The driver wasn't paying attention. Behind the wheel was Brandon Prescott, 17 years old, texting about weekend plans. He never saw Marcus. The Porsche struck Marcus directly, hitting his left leg and throwing him against the restaurant wall. Marcus collapsed. His leg was broken in 3 places. The tibia was shattered. There was soft tissue damage. He was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. He spent 4 days undergoing surgery, having a metal plate inserted into his leg. The medical bills totaled $147,000. His insurance covered most of it, but he was still left with $18,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Marcus couldn't work for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of lost income, lost tips, lost opportunities. He couldn't make rent on his studio apartment. His landlord gave him an eviction notice. He ended up staying with his mother, which was humiliating because he had worked so hard to be independent. He lost his car when he couldn't make payments. The doctors told him he would likely have chronic pain for the rest of his life. His dream of opening a cafe suddenly felt very far away. Now Brandon Prescott's father is a man named Robert Prescott. Robert is a real estate developer worth approximately $250 million. He has political connections. He plays golf with state senators. He donates to the right charities. Money has always solved his problems. When Brandon got a speeding ticket in 10th grade, Robert called someone. The ticket disappeared. When Brandon got caught drinking at a party, Robert called someone. There were no consequences. Brandon had never experienced a real consequence in his entire life. His father's money had insulated him from reality. The night of the accident, Robert called his lawyer, Gregory Ashford, who specializes in making problems go away for wealthy clients. For 3 months, the case went nowhere. Police reports were filed, but court dates kept getting postponed. It was as if the machinery of justice had simply stopped working. Then Marcus made a decision that changed everything. He decided to hire an attorney and file a civil lawsuit. He decided he wasn't going to accept that money and influence could erase this. He stood up for himself. That case is how Brandon Prescott ended up in my courtroom on Friday, November 13th. It was a cold morning. There was frost on the ground. I walked into my chambers at 8:15 like I always do. My clerk, Christina, had been with me for 23 years. She handed me the case files and told me what this case was about. I took special notice. Judge, this one involves a minor who hit someone with a car while texting. The defendant's father is Robert Prescott, the real estate developer. He's hired significant legal representation, she said. I nodded. I've learned that the cases with the most money and the most lawyers are often the cases where justice is most needed. I read through the file carefully. I saw the police report. I saw the witness statements. I saw the hospital records. I saw Marcus's medical bills. I saw photographs of the damaged Porsche and the damaged parking lot and the damaged life of a young man who had done nothing wrong. I saw that Brandon had been cited for reckless driving, texting while operating a vehicle, and failure to yield. At 9 o'clock I walked into my courtroom. I sat down on my bench and looked out at the gallery. I saw Marcus Chen with his attorney, Jennifer Moore, a dedicated public defender who believed in her client. And I saw Brandon with his father, Robert, and their team of 3 expensive lawyers. They radiated confidence. They radiated the kind of certainty that comes from having always gotten their way. I called the case Chen v. Prescott. This is a civil suit regarding injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident on August 19th. The plaintiff is seeking damages for medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and permanent disability. Miss Moore, you may begin. Jennifer Moore stood up and presented the facts systematically. She presented the police report. She presented the witness statement. She presented Marcus's hospital records, the surgery documentation, photographs of his injuries. She presented the medical bills, $147,000 in total. She presented his employment records, showing he had missed 6 weeks of work. She presented his statement about losing his apartment, about the eviction, about having to move back with his mother at 23 because of an accident that wasn't his fault. Then she called Marcus to testify. He stood and walked to the witness stand, limping slowly. I asked him to tell me what happened. I was doing my job. I was unloading boxes. I wasn't paying attention to the parking lot because I thought it was safe. But Brandon Prescott's car came flying through at maybe 40 or 50 miles per hour, way too fast. I didn't see it coming. I didn't have time to move. It just hit me. I remember flying through the air. I remember hitting the wall. Then I remember nothing until I was in an ambulance, he said. I asked, how has this affected you? He paused, gathering his thoughts. Your Honor, I lost everything. I lost my apartment. I lost my car. I lost 6 weeks of work, which meant thousands of dollars in lost income. But worse than that, I lost my sense of safety. I lost my confidence. I have chronic pain now. My doctor says it might never go away. I used to have dreams about opening my own café, and now I don't know if I can stand on my feet long enough to make that happen. All because Brandon was texting about weekend plans, he said. Then it was Brandon's attorney's turn. He attacked Marcus immediately. He suggested Marcus was exaggerating his injuries. He suggested Marcus was trying to cash in on a minor accident. He questioned whether parking lots are inherently dangerous, whether Marcus had placed himself in danger. Marcus answered each question calmly and honestly. Yes, he was focused on work. No, he couldn't see oncoming traffic. No, parking lots aren't dangerous if people drive at reasonable speeds. No, he didn't place himself in danger. He was just doing his job. Then Brandon's attorney called Brandon to testify. Brandon stood and walked to the witness stand. He was 17, still in high school. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Everything about him suggested wealth and privilege. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something that disturbed me. I saw a complete lack of understanding. I saw no remorse. I saw no empathy. I asked, Brandon, do you understand the severity of what happened on August 19th? He looked at me blankly. I was texting, and I didn't see him. It was an accident. Accidents happen. I'm sorry he got hurt, but I didn't mean to hit him. I said, do you understand that you nearly killed that man? Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I guess so, but like I didn't mean to. And my dad said this would probably get settled anyway, so it's not like a big deal. There it was. He believed this wasn't a big deal. He believed his father could make it go away. He believed consequences were for other people, not him. Then Jennifer Moore stood up for cross-examination. Brandon, were you aware that texting while driving is illegal? Yes. Were you aware that it's dangerous? Yes. Did you text while driving anyway? Yes. Why? Brandon looked confused. I don't know. I was just texting my girlfriend about plans for the weekend. I didn't think about it. He didn't think about it. He didn't consider that his actions could hurt someone. He just did what he wanted and expected everything would be fine. Jennifer asked, have you ever apologized to Marcus Chen? My attorneys told me not to talk to him. Brandon said, that wasn't my question. Have you apologized? No, but I'm apologizing now, I guess. This non-apology hung in the air. Everyone understood what it meant. Brandon wasn't sorry. He was going through the motions. Jennifer summarized the facts. The facts were simple. Brandon had been texting while driving. He had caused an accident. He had injured Marcus. The damages were documented. She asked for $265,000, which was exactly what Marcus had lost. Then Brandon's attorney argued that while Brandon had made a mistake, the damages were excessive. He suggested $60,000 would be fair, that this would allow Marcus to move on, that this would be reasonable. I listened to all of this and took notes. I thought about Marcus, who had lost his apartment, his car, his income, who was still struggling. I thought about Brandon, who had never experienced a real consequence, who didn't understand that his actions had hurt someone, who believed money could make this all go away. I told both sides that I would take the case under advisement and render my judgment the next day. I wanted time to think about this. I wanted time to consider not just the law, but the deeper issues at play. That night, I went home and thought about my father. I thought about his words about power and character. I thought about what it means to be a judge. I thought about Brandon, 17, with his whole life ahead, having learned all the wrong lessons from his father's money. I thought about Marcus, 23, his dreams deferred, his body damaged, his sense of safety shattered. I made my decision that night. The next morning I told Christina that I wanted to do something unusual. I wanted Brandon to call his father on speakerphone during my judgment. I wanted Robert Prescott to hear what I had to say. At 10 o'clock we reconvened in my courtroom. I took the bench and looked out at Marcus and Brandon and their attorneys. I began to speak. This case has forced me to think deeply about what justice means. It has forced me to consider not just the law, but the values that the law is meant to protect. I see Marcus Chen, who was doing his job, who was struck by a vehicle driven by a teenager not paying attention. I see medical bills. I see lost wages. I see chronic pain. I see dreams deferred. I see the reality of what it means when someone's negligence affects another person's life. I paused and looked at Brandon. I also see a young man who has never been told no, whose father's money and influence have insulated him from reality. Brandon, I want you to call your father right now on speakerphone. Brandon looked confused. His attorneys objected. They said this was highly unusual. I looked at them and said, I'm the judge. I set the procedures in my courtroom. Call your father, now. After a moment, Brandon pulled out his phone and dialed. The phone rang, and a man's voice answered. Brandon, why are you calling? You're supposed to be in court. I said, Mr. Prescott, this is Judge Judith Morrison. I am reading my judgment in Chen v. Prescott, and I wanted you to hear it directly. There was a pause. Judge, my attorneys assured me this would be handled appropriately. I said, that's exactly the problem. This has been handled by expensive attorneys and money trying to minimize what happened. But in my courtroom, money doesn't determine justice. I continued, here is my judgment. Brandon Prescott is liable for all damages claimed by Marcus Chen. I am awarding Marcus $265,000 to cover his medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. Additionally, I am awarding $50,000 in punitive damages because Brandon's behavior represents a failure of parenting and a disregard for the rights of others. I paused. Brandon will complete 50 hours of community service at a non-profit serving people with disabilities. He will take a court-approved road safety course, and every month for the next year, Brandon will write a letter to Marcus Chen, not his attorneys. Brandon personally will write and reflect on what he has learned about the consequences of his actions. On the phone, I heard Robert say, Your Honor, this is outrageous. I will appeal this immediately. I said, You have that right, Mr. Prescott. But understand this. You have taught your son that money can buy him out of consequences, and now you have a judgment against you for $315,000. I hope that clarifies something. Justice isn't for sale. I hung up the speakerphone and looked at Brandon. For the first time, I saw fear. I saw the beginning of understanding. Court is adjourned, I said, and I struck my gavel. The courtroom didn't erupt in applause. There was a quiet solemnity. Marcus stood up, and I saw tears in his eyes. He shook Jennifer's hand, overwhelmed. That night, I thought about what I had done. I had been unconventional. I had put personal feelings into a legal decision. I knew that. I also knew an appeal was almost certain. But I also knew something else. When people have been protected from consequences their entire lives, sometimes the only way they learn is through a moment of clarity, when the shield is removed and they see reality. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Brandon. The handwriting was childish. the letters uneven. The letter said, "Your Honor, I've been thinking about what you said. I keep seeing Marcus's face, the way he described losing his apartment, losing his car, losing his dreams. I keep thinking about the fact that I did that to him. My father is angry about the judgment, but I keep thinking that maybe you were right. Maybe I needed to understand what I did. I'm starting community service tomorrow at a center for people with disabilities. I'm nervous, but I think I need to see it. I think I need to understand." I read that letter and felt something shift inside me. I took off my glasses and wiped my eyes. Maybe I was unprofessional. Maybe I let my emotions guide me, but maybe it was right according to something deeper. Over the next several months, I followed Brandon's progress through the letters he wrote to Marcus. At first they were stilted and artificial, but gradually they became more honest. He started describing what he was seeing at the non-profit center. He started describing conversations with people who lived with permanent injuries. He started to understand. About 6 months after my judgment, I was invited to speak at a local high school. In the hallway, I saw a young man waiting for me. I recognized him immediately. It was Brandon, but he was different. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. He stood with genuine humility. He said, "Your Honor, I wanted to thank you. I know you were probably unconventional. I know my father is still appealing the judgment, but you changed something in me. At the community service center, I met a woman named Sarah, who was paralyzed in a car accident because someone was texting. She said the person was texting about weekend plans, just like I was. She said she had been an athlete before, and now she would never walk again. She said she forgave him, but that forgiveness didn't undo the damage. When she told me that, I thought about Marcus. I thought about how I could have paralyzed him, and something changed in me." Brandon paused, struggling with emotion. "I've been thinking about the justice system. I've been reading about laws and consequences and accountability. I think I want to study law, not to become like my father's lawyers, making problems go away, but to help people like Marcus, to advocate for stricter laws against distracted driving, to make sure other teenagers understand that their actions have consequences." I looked at this young man, 18 now, speaking with genuine humility and purpose, and I felt hope. I said, "Brandon, I'm proud of you, not for what happened. What you did to Marcus was wrong, but I'm proud of how you've responded to facing the consequences. That takes character. That takes growth. Keep going." Brandon started volunteering with a non-profit advocating for teen driver safety. He used his story, his privilege, his platform to tell other young people what had happened. He and Marcus eventually met, and while I'm not naive enough to think they became close friends, they found a way to work together on an educational program teaching high school students about distracted driving. About a year after my judgment, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. He was shopping with his mother, walking with less of a limp. I asked how he was doing. "Your Honor, I'm using some of the settlement money to help open my small café. It won't be the grand opening I imagined, but it's happening. My dream is still alive. The chronic pain is still there, but I've learned to manage it. More importantly, I've learned that the system can work, that justice can happen, that standing up for myself matters," he said. Over the years that followed, I sometimes wondered if I had been right to be so unconventional. I wondered if I had crossed a line, but I also knew that I had witnessed something real. I had watched a young man face the consequences of his actions. I had watched him grow. I had watched him choose a different path than the one his father had laid out for him. I had watched someone learn the most important lesson that money can't teach you, that your actions matter, that other people matter, that integrity matters more than wealth or power. This is what I believe as I near the end of my career. Consequences are one of the greatest gifts we can give the people we love. When we shield people from consequences, we steal the opportunity for them to grow. We teach them the rules don't apply. We create people who are unprepared for a world where the rules do apply. If you're watching this and you're a parent, I want to ask you something. Are you helping your children by protecting them from consequences or hurting them? Are you teaching them they're special and exempt from the rules, or teaching them they have responsibility to the world around them? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are the most important questions you'll answer as a parent. If you're watching this and you're a young person, understand this. Your parents' money, your family's connections, your social status, none of it will save you from the consequences of your actions. What will save you is your character. What will save you is your willingness to take responsibility. What will save you is understanding that your actions ripple out into the world. This is why I've dedicated my life to the law. because justice matters, because accountability matters, and because I believe that when we hold people accountable with compassion and wisdom, we give them the greatest gift, the opportunity to become better versions of themselves. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it makes you think about power and privilege and what we owe each other. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell them about Brandon and Marcus and the November morning when a young man finally understood that money can't buy him out of consequences, because these lessons about accountability and character and justice matter now more than ever.